This is the mop-up for March 8th, 2024. I'm David Feldman, coming to you from New York City. Thank you so much for finding me. President Joe Biden delivered his third State of the Union Thursday night, looking past Republicans and taking his case directly to the American people. It was the most political State of the Union in modern American history. Biden didn't ask Republicans for help. Instead, he lashed out at them and their overlord, Donald Trump. Biden opened his speech by scolding Republicans for lying about the events of January 6th. He didn't waste any time. He called January 6th what it was, an insurrection, and challenged not just the Republican narrative of the stolen election, but he challenged their patriotism. He said, "You can't say you love America only when you win." In the first few minutes of his speech, Biden said democracy is under attack here at home. He warned of anti-democratic forces pretty much among us in this room. And though he never mentioned Donald Trump by name, we knew who he meant when he warned against political violence. It was a tongue-lashing Republicans were forced to endure. Some heckled, some sat stoically, refusing to take their medicine. But the American people heard Joe Biden. And what they saw last night was a stark alternative to Donald Trump, who offers nothing but vengeance, contempt, and blame. Biden delivered a vision for America, a promise to keep working to improve our nation instead of working to remove those some perceive as undesirable. The contrast going into November cannot be any starker. Biden offers inclusivity, Trump promises intolerance and hate. Biden led with Ukraine, not only calling Putin a threat to all of Europe, but he lumped Donald Trump in with Putin. It was positively brazen. He reminded Republicans that Trump is more than willing to give the Russian leader free rein. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of our House, nodded his head in agreement when Biden said we need to support Ukraine. But Johnson was unable to applaud because his hands have been tied by Donald Trump. Never before has a president used his State of the Union to attack his opponent in the upcoming general election. At least I don't think so. I've never seen this before. Joe Biden is no Jimmy Carter. He has no intention of losing his second term by keeping the gloves on. Like Harry Truman, who surprised everyone when he was reelected, Joe Biden gave the Republicans hell simply by telling the truth. All Trump and the Republicans have are lies. Biden and the Democrats have truth on their side. Again, as I always say on this show, you're not going to reason with MAGA voters. But close to a third of Republicans either voted for Nikki Haley or stayed home on Super Tuesday. Those are the voters Biden was trying to reach last night, and he doesn't need to win over all of them. Elections are won on the margins, which means Biden just needs to peel off a few million of Nikki Haley's supporters. And later on in the show, I'll tell you about some new polling that suggests Trump is in a lot more trouble come November than anyone understands. Biden's message last night was, I've given up on Trump and I've given up on you, this Republican-controlled Congress. He lashed out at them, pretty much saying, you cannot work with these people. You're a joke. He laughed at them. He essentially asked the American people to give him back the House and let him keep the Senate so he no longer has to deal with this nonsense. He also excoriated the Supreme Court for its decision to overturn Roe v. Wade and warned them they have incurred the wrath of the female electorate. Biden said in his next term he will pass legislation that reinstates Roe v. Wade. Biden has now delivered 3 State of the Unions. The first 2 were conciliatory, where he asked Republicans to work with him. And he succeeded. He was able, in his first 2 years, to pass the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS Act. He even got gun control legislation passed. But this State of the Union pretty much said, I'm done with you Republicans. 3 State of the Unions with 3 different speakers sitting behind him. First Pelosi, then McCarthy, and now Mike Johnson. Johnson looked like a tiny man with even tinier ideas, while Biden last night was large, bold, and visionary. At times, Joe Biden invoked the soaring vision of Jack Kennedy, the gravitas of Franklin Roosevelt, and the sweeping oratory of Dr. Martin Luther King. All Mike Johnson could do was sit there with a pained look. Often he would nod in agreement, but while others rose in support, Johnson remained seated for fear of alienating Donald Trump. Occasionally, Johnson shook his head in disagreement, as if to correct Joe Biden, like when the president reminded everyone that Donald Trump's tax cuts for the rich tacked on trillions to our national debt. We all know that's the truth. Johnson shook his head as if to say Joe Biden is lying. But Johnson is the liar. And when Republicans took Johnson's cue and began to boo when Biden said those tax cuts increased our debt, Biden turned to the American people and said, folks, look it up. He's given them hell by telling the truth. Then Biden once again took his case to the American people. He said, folks at home, do you think our tax system is fair? Do you think it favors the wealthy billionaires and corporations? And by doing that, he said, I am in full campaign mode, and I don't care what Republicans have to say because they're liars. Let's be done with them. They are here for one reason, to lower taxes for billionaires on the backs of the middle class. He didn't say that, but it was implicit. Then he took Trump's signature issue, the border crisis, and threw it back in the Republican Party's face. He reminded them and the American people that last month there was a bipartisan border bill on the table, ironed out by conservatives and Democrats, a bill that would add thousands of people at the border to process these migrants and even shut the border down when there's a surge of people trying to get into this country. Biden then reminded everyone that Donald Trump killed this bipartisan border bill because he needs something to run on. Johnson shook his head as if to say Biden is lying. But the camera, at least on CNN, cut immediately to Republican Senator James Lankford, who negotiated the border bill with Democrats. And you could see Lankford, the conservative Republican, mouthing the words, that's true. That's true. We had a border bill last month and Trump killed it. Lankford, if you remember, after that border bill collapsed, has stated openly that Trump killed the border bill for political purposes, and he's been getting threats because he supports the border bill. And now Biden has something to run on when it comes to the migrants, while Trump has something to run against going into the general election. Biden defanged Trump when it comes to the border. See, Trump can't run on the economy. He can't run on abortion. He can only run on hatred of the migrants, blood and soil, Nazi shit. And now Biden and the Democrats have said, hey, we have a bill, the most comprehensive border bill in 30 years. Join me. Join us, Donald Trump, and support this bill. Trump is now cornered. He will not support a border bill because he doesn't want Biden to get credit for fixing the problem. Again, the MAGA voters will say the bill doesn't go far enough. But as we get closer to Election Day, independents, Haley voters are going to be reminded that Trump is an inveterate liar who rather break and divide instead of fix anything like the border. It was a great speech, one you'd expect to hear Biden deliver when he accepts the nomination at the Democratic convention. I've never seen a State of the Union like this. He offered up uncomfortable truths to the Republican Party. He said the truth, but they didn't want to hear. This is, by all measures, the strongest economy in 60 years, all because of three key pieces of legislation Joe Biden got passed despite strong opposition from Republicans in that audience. He answered the Republican lie about inflation. It's coming down, almost down to exactly where the Fed wants it, at 2%. And most importantly, he answered the lie about crime in America, which spiked during Trump's last year in office, but is now coming back down to record lows. The Republicans run on lies: the lie of inflation, the lie of crime, and of course, the lie of migrants. Biden bragged about bringing COVID under control when he distributed hundreds and hundreds of millions of vaccines and lashed out at Donald Trump for doing such a piss-poor job during the early months of that epidemic. Republicans in the audience were infuriated that Biden reminded everyone of how bad Trump's COVID response was. They considered that hitting below the belt. Too much truth. Too much truth is considered unfair, unsportsmanlike to Republicans. One heckler had to be escorted out of the room when Biden continued to trash talk Donald Trump's COVID response. And this, COVID, this is going to be a really tough one for Republicans. COVID. 1 million Americans died because Donald Trump crapped the bed on COVID. It's indefensible if you're a Republican. Trump and Republicans throughout the COVID crisis downplayed the dangers of COVID, and they still do. Biden, on COVID, has Republicans boxed in a corner. He can remind voters of how bad it was 4 years ago, the deaths, the isolation. And now he can say definitively how much better things are when it comes to COVID. And the Republicans have no response. Joe Biden can run on COVID. On COVID alone, he can win on COVID. Like Bush's response to Hurricane Katrina, Trump's response to COVID is indefensible, except it's far, far worse. And Katrina came after Bush had already been reelected. Republicans can't say things have gotten better when it comes to COVID, because that would be admitting that COVID was bad, which everyone knows it was. They can't even take credit for Trump's Operation Warp Speed, which delivered a vaccine in less than a year, because the Republicans oppose vaccines. COVID, I realized this last night, is the ace in Joe Biden's sleeve. That's why Republicans were so infuriated last night when Joe Biden attacked Donald Trump for mishandling the COVID response. Biden, from now till November, can hammer away at Trump over COVID, and Republicans are powerless. All they can say is, it was never that bad, because that's what their position has been since day one. And anything that betrays that position puts them in an impossible hole. They cannot take credit for the vaccine. And they can't say things are getting better because of the vaccine, because that's admitting things were once catastrophic. COVID is going to be what Joe Biden gets to run on come November. Mark my words. Who do you want in the Oval Office when there's a pandemic? Democrats or Trump and the Republicans, who insist our government can't do anything right and prove it every time we put them in charge of it? I've never seen a president heckled this way during a State of the Union. Never. Republicans, when called on their own BS, freak out. They can't take it. They freak out. But all you had to do last night was watch Speaker Mike Johnson's painful grimace. At times, you could see that he knew Biden was right. At times, it looked like Mike Johnson wished he was a Democrat. But then he would eventually snap back into place, reminding himself, I'm just a frightened MAGA pawn who takes his orders from Donald Trump. Biden did everything he had to do last night and then some. He proved fire in the belly. He proved he has a sweeping vision for America, a pro-corporate yet populist vision that is pro-union, pro-democracy, pro-working class, children, and seniors. When it comes to politics, you can't do any better than what he did last night. He called for a 25% across-the-board tax on billionaires. He called for capping the price of insulin for all Americans, extending the ability of Medicare to negotiate the price for nearly 500 drugs, and he urged Congress to bring back the assault weapons ban. He leaned in and brought a survivor from Uvalde and admonished Republicans to do something. He also bragged about wiping out student debt for nearly 4 million Americans, while at the same time, and this is really important politically, he boasted of jobs created by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that pay as much as $100,000 a year to Americans without a college education. Without a college education. This is now the second State of the Union where Joe Biden talked about Americans without a college education. He is the only president in my lifetime to address the needs of Americans without college education. He's not blaming people without college educations. And hopefully, unlikely, but hopefully that will register with some of the MAGA morons out there. I doubt it. Here's the thing, though. All exit polls show that Donald Trump doesn't have the support of Americans with college diplomas. That's the great divide here in the United States. Those with college degrees and those without college degrees. And a lot of people who didn't finish college or high school end up voting for Trump because they think Democrats make them feel stupid. And to be fair, they may be right in some respects. The previous messages from Democratic presidents like Clinton and Obama was, hey, there's nothing I can do to stop your jobs from going overseas. What I can do is preach personal responsibility, help you get a college education so you can find new jobs in the new economy. Clinton and Obama alienated the working class, particularly people without college degrees, by pulling that personal responsibility crap. It doesn't work. And that's what I believe contributed to the working class migrating to the Republican Party. That's what caused so many middle class and lower middle class Americans to view Democrats as elitists. The Democrats under Clinton and Obama too often blamed Americans for not bettering themselves by staying in school. And I always hated that message. There's that famous scene in Primary Colors that was taken from an actual speech that Bill Clinton gave to dock workers in New Hampshire. He leveled with them. This was supposed to be a great moment for Bill Clinton, where he leveled with the dock workers in 92. And he said, look, I can't bring back your jobs, but I can offer you the training you need for jobs in the new economy. That was something Clinton said. And effete Democrats in the mainstream media loved him for it. He was embracing globalism at the expense of America's working class. And when he became president, he signed NAFTA, which hollowed out our manufacturing base. But it was all okay, said the Democrats, because Clinton was going to train people without college degrees to find new jobs. He blamed the working class for all our jobs going overseas. And that is why I believe the working class abandoned Democrats, not all of the working class, but too many. And they mistakenly believe hucksters, phony populists like Josh Hawley, Donald Trump, and J.D. Vance. That's where they falsely believe that they're on the side of the working class. They're not. They're anti-union. Biden and the Democrats finally recognize that it's the job of a president to keep the manufacturing jobs here at home. Jobs that don't require a college education. Especially since so many Americans believed Clinton and Obama. And they got their college educations. They did what they were told and ended up racking up close to $2 trillion in student loan debt. That's where the resentment, a lot of the resentment flows from Biden, from Obama and Clinton say, get a college education. And a lot of young people came out. We got $2 trillion in student loan debt. And the jobs never materialized until Biden became president. Biden and the Democrats are finally recognizing college isn't the answer for everyone, nor should it be. Maybe this will register with the MAGA morons. I doubt it. Now look, on this show, I pull no punches. I get a lot of pushback from Democrats who say, stop calling Trump's supporters morons. Okay, then I'll call them Nazis. That's it. They're either morons or Nazis or both. And I'm sorry, but if you vote for Trump, you're one of two types of Americans. You're either a millionaire or you're stupid. That's it. If you're a millionaire, well, you're still stupid, but I can see how it makes sense to you because you have limited vision. I can see how it makes sense to vote for Trump because you know all he's going to do is lower taxes for the wealthy. And how's he going to do it? On the backs of the middle class and the poor. That's all he did in his first term, and that's all he's going to do if he's ever allowed back in the Oval Office. Cut taxes for the wealthy. Now, the other people who vote for Trump are just plain stupid. They don't have money. They're just stupid. You got your stupid millionaires, and then you just have your plain stupid. The just plain stupid are stupid enough to believe that maybe they could become millionaires, or they might think they have more money than they actually do. They are hateful losers who are too ignorant to understand the role fiscal spending plays in bettering the lives of everyone. Or they refuse to be a part of this world, and they choose to scapegoat. They choose scapegoats to blame for their own alienation. They refuse to take any blame for their isolation. They look for scapegoats. They are stupid. And so you have the millionaires who vote for Trump. They're stupid because their investments always do better when a Democrat is in the White House. Millionaires who vote for Trump are stupid. They're stupid because they think the less they pay in taxes, the more they get to keep. What they fail to understand is, because they're stupid, is the more the government invests, the bigger returns on everybody's assets. Look at the stock market. Look at your 401k when a Democrat is in the White House. Okay, so the Republican Party is the party of stupid. Donald Trump has said so. Donald Trump's success flows from one idea, that the American people are as stupid as he is. And some of them are. In fact, everyone who votes for Donald Trump is either as stupid as Donald Trump or even dumber. Now, a lot of Americans don't like being told that they're ignorant, stupid, morons, uneducated. And Joe Biden gets that. The Democrats get that. And like I said, elections are won on the margins. And I think there's a message here for the Democrats, a message that is a stark departure from previous Democratic administrations. It's not the job of voters to learn new skills. It's the job of politicians to keep manufacturing jobs here in America. Biden gets that. And I believe he's going to win back the working class. I do. Me, however, I'm not running for office. And very few Trump supporters listen to this podcast, especially since they can no longer leave comments. So I'm going to tell you my winning message. Anyone who votes for Donald Trump is a brain-dead moron, an evolutionary dead ender, as I like to call them. They are evolutionary dead enders. Not only that, but America would be a lot better off without them. Like I said, I'm not running for office. I can speak the truth. Trump voters are morons, and they're Nazis. They are Nazis. I read the comments they try to leave on my channel. They are Nazis. I'm not running for office. I don't need to sugarcoat it. Trump voters are ignorant, illiterate, mouth-breathing Nazis. And you don't defeat Nazis by making them feel comfortable. Trump voters are Nazis, and they must be defeated in November. And you don't coddle or negotiate with Nazis. You beat them by outnumbering them. This is the mop-up for March 8th, 2024. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. I'm David Feldman, and this is a podcast. Please download this show as an audio podcast when you take your next walk, go on your next drive, or if you're assisting someone in need by cleaning their kitchen, cooking them a meal, or cleaning their bathroom. Listen to this show while you're doing volunteer work. I ask you to download this as an audio podcast wherever you get your audio podcasts, and like this episode and share it. Mike Johnson actually got a massive spending bill through Congress on Wednesday. After nearly 6 months without a 2024 budget, Speaker Johnson moved a few steps closer to actually getting a budget passed. He passed a $467.5 billion appropriations bill on Wednesday. It bundles 6 of the 12 appropriations bills that have to be passed in order for the 2024 budget to finally be operational. So it looks like we're halfway there. Just 6 more appropriations bills to go. The next bundle of bills could be voted on as early as next week, and that will add up to $1.2 trillion. Speaker Johnson bypassed obstruction from his far-right Conservative Freedom Caucus by introducing Wednesday's spending bill through a parliamentary procedure known as suspension, which requires 2/3 of the House. We've talked about suspension. The bill had the full support of the Democrats, with 132 Republicans voting for it and only 83 Republicans voting against it. Republicans in the House are pushing a bill that would order ByteDance, the owners of TikTok, a Chinese company, to divest its video sharing platform and sell it to an American business within the next 165 days. Speaker Mike Johnson also said on Thursday he would support a bill that forcibly removes TikTok from all American app stores, like on Apple or Google. You would not be able to get TikTok on an app store until it is no longer owned by a Chinese company. President Biden, whose reelection campaign just started a TikTok account, is expected to sign the bill, which moved out of the Commerce Committee and, according to House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, will advance to the floor next week for a vote. Now that China is generally considered a foreign adversary, TikTok has come under criticism for harvesting data from millions of Americans, which the FBI director, along with many progressives and conservatives, although not too many libertarians, there seems to be a consensus that TikTok is a national security risk. Either that or YouTube is donating a lot of money to both parties. TikTok is asking its users to call their members of Congress, urging them not to vote in favor of the bill. And thousands of children reportedly called their members of Congress, leaving messages where they were literally crying on the phone for fear they would lose TikTok. And that crying, that panic suggests perhaps we should be shutting down TikTok as well as every other social media platform out there. It may not be the worst idea. If you've got kids crying because they're going to lose TikTok, but at least they called their members of Congress. They infuriated Congress. Axios reports House members say their offices have been flooded with calls from, and I'm not making this up, people with phony names like Ben Dover, Dick Hertz. I mean, these are names I used as a kid, but America's children are calling their members of Congress saying, this is Dick Hertz and Ben Dover, don't you dare shut down TikTok. Well, that effort seems to be backfiring, making members of Congress angrier and more likely to vote against TikTok. An estimated 170 million Americans use TikTok. Again, the bill isn't saying to outlaw TikTok, it's saying the Chinese cannot own it. Alabamians can resume in vitro fertilization treatment to have more idiot children after the idiot governor of Alabama, Kay Ivey, signed into law a new bill protecting fertility doctors in Alabama from being charged with murder after Alabama's idiot Supreme Court ruled last month that frozen embryos are people. Speaker Mike Johnson was asked yesterday what he thought about the Alabama ruling and said he agrees embryos are people, but he wasn't sure how that should affect in vitro fertilization. Axios reported yesterday that Johnson's Louisiana gave personhood to human embryos back in 1986, but reached a compromise where fertility clinics in Louisiana could work with frozen embryos so long as they are stored out of state. You know, the same way abortion is an abomination to these people, unless it's your own daughter, in which case, take her to California. Frozen embryos, you have to discard a lot of frozen embryos to get one that sticks and makes a baby. So the Republicans in Louisiana said frozen embryos are humans, but if my daughter needs a baby, she can bring in a frozen embryo from out of state. Florida Republican Congressman Byron Donalds told Axios that if he were Donald Trump's vice president, he would refuse to certify the election on January 6, 2028. if he felt there was any evidence of voter fraud. He's auditioning for vice president. He was asked if he agreed with Mike Pence's 2020 decision to certify the election for Joe Biden. Donalds refused to answer. Right now, I'm starting to believe Byron Donalds of Florida, will end up on the ticket with Trump. And not just because the ticket would be called the Two Donalds. I think he's in the running. He's black, from Florida, he's loyal. And it's a smart move for Donald Trump. Put a black man on the ticket, he disarms any accusations of racism, and any criticism of Byron Donalds will be thrown back at Democrats as racism. I'm not sure, but as far as MAGA morons go, Byron Donalds is pretty smart for an idiot. I'm going to make a prediction. It's March 8th, 2024. Here's my prediction. Byron Donalds will be Trump's vice president. The reason I'm making this prediction is I get a lot of my predictions wrong, and I'm really scared that Trump is going to pick Byron Donalds as his vice president. I think that would make it harder in November for the Democrats because, well, you know why. Politico reports that once Trump seals the nomination, he will begin receiving intelligence briefings, a tradition dating back to 1952, when Harry Truman decided candidates from both major parties should be brought up to speed on national security issues going on around the world. Trump, of course, is the first nominee of a major party who would be getting intelligence briefings while at the same time awaiting trial for mishandling classified documents. So flagrantly, he was charged with violating the Espionage Act. Okay? Once he gets the nomination, supposedly he will get intelligence briefings while awaiting trial for violating the Espionage Act. Politico reports the 72-year-old tradition is not legally required and is provided as a courtesy to the major candidates by whoever is in the White House. Biden suspended intelligence briefings for Trump when he became president. Often ex-presidents will be brought up to speed and given intelligence briefings, and presidents will debrief the CIA. Ex-presidents often debrief the CIA. Biden said not with Trump. So it'll be interesting to see if Joe Biden starts allowing Trump to receive intelligence briefings, or very limited intelligence briefings like, this is where the United Kingdom is, and over here is France. I mean, he doesn't know. He still thinks Turkey and Hungary are on the border with Russia. That's what Donald Trump keeps saying. John Bolton, Trump's odious former national security advisor, told Politico that President Biden would be justified in not extending the intelligence briefings to Donald Trump, considering Trump's history of carelessness, not just with the documents, but with the information as well. I mean, he was notorious to just walk into a room filled with Russian diplomats and saying, hey, well, anyway, I won't repeat what he told the Russian diplomats. Jury selection begins later this month in the Manhattan District Attorney's criminal trial against Donald Trump. Trump has been indicted for falsifying business records in order to hide hush money payments to porn star Stormy Daniels during the lead up to the 2016 presidential election. This is why you don't see Melania. All these primary victories, you never see Melania by Donald's side. Because of Trump's history of death threats, lobbed at previous judges, prosecutors, witnesses, and jurors in those other Trump-related cases last year. The judge in this trial, the one coming up this month in the Manhattan District Court, the judge in this trial, Juan Merchan, on Thursday ruled that the names of the jurors in this Manhattan case will remain anonymous. He also extended the protective order to members of his own staff, writing, quote, "The court further finds good cause on the record before it that there is a likelihood of bribery, jury tampering, or of physical injury or harassment of jurors," unquote. That was the ruling from Judge Juan Merchan in the Manhattan District courtroom, the trial that starts this month for Donald Trump. Now, some of my listeners, I still have some MAGA listeners, we've cleaned up the comments section. It's now impossible for Russian trolls or Trump supporters to leave comments on my website or my YouTube channel. Occasionally some sneak in, but they can't comment anymore. Some of them sneak in, and I do have MAGA listeners who write to me, and they complain that I have said countless times that there have been death threats leveled at judges, jurors, witnesses in these Trump trials. And they write to me, if that's true, how come I never heard about it? And I write back, because you're stupid. That's why you've never heard about it. You're stupid. You don't get your news from reliable sources. It's a fact that Judge Arthur Engoron, who presided over the New York State civil fraud trial, along with his clerk, has had white powder mailed to them. They were swatted, bomb scares phoned into their homes. They've received countless death threats via text and phone messages. The same applies to Judge Tanya Chutkan in the D.C. election interference trial. The same applies to Special Counsel Jack Smith, who's spending millions on security as he goes after Donald Trump. E. Jean Carroll and her attorney received countless death threats from Trump supporters. Fani Willis, the Fulton County District Attorney, as well as her entire staff, require round-the-clock security. And not once has Donald Trump said, knock it off. Instead, he says, these people are angry. He says what he told Kevin McCarthy on January 6th, when Kevin McCarthy got on the phone and said, get them out of here, call off this attack. And Donald Trump said, I guess they're angrier about the election results than you are. All these death threats, and Donald Trump says, there's nothing I can do about it. In fact, he says, my people aren't going to put up with this, and I can't control them. The judge in the E. Jean Carroll trial dismissed the jurors, but not before reminding them, do not tell anyone you were part of this trial because it would be dangerous for you. This is mobster shit. Mobster shit that we now take for granted. When you go up against Donald Trump, it's a given that your life will be threatened. Judge Merchan is also considering a gag order to prevent Trump from making any disparaging comments regarding this trial, because, as we know, Donald Trump attempts to poison the jury pool. His attorneys say a gag order would be unconstitutional. They say that because they are being paid to pretend they don't understand the First Amendment. Donald Trump supporters believe he's a billionaire, but right now he's having a lot of trouble coming up with the $83.3 million judgment against him in the E. Jean Carroll defamation trial. Even worse, that $83.3 million is now, for reasons I don't quite understand, $91 million. Leave a comment. I tried to find out today why it's been bumped up to $91 million. And it's not the $5 million. He's not tacking on the $5 million for the settlement from last year. Is it interest? Is it a penalty? I don't know. On January 26, a New York jury ordered Donald Trump to pay E. Jean Carroll $83.3 million in damages. That's on top of last year's jury that ordered Trump to pay E. Jean Carroll more than $5 million after they decided he had raped and defamed her. But Trump is having trouble finding the $91 million. I know he posted the bond for the $5 million from last year, but he cannot find $91 million that must be paid, has to be handed over to the courts. It will be placed in an escrow account and released pending appeal. It either will end up going to E. Jean Carroll or given back to Donald Trump. New York law states that that fine must be paid and held in an account. And then after the appeals process, it's either given to E. Jean Carroll or returned to Trump. On Thursday, the judge in the E. Jean Carroll case, Lewis Kaplan, rejected Trump's request for a little more time to come up with the $91 million. But tell me again, MAGA morons, how your candidate is such a big billionaire. Judge Kaplan, in yesterday's ruling, said the jury made its decision more than a month ago, which gave Trump and his attorneys plenty of time to get Donald Trump's financial affairs in order. Kaplan yesterday said Trump has exactly, I just love this. Trump has exactly 3 days to hand over the money, or he has to find a company that is stupid enough to post a bond. Who's going to post a bond for Donald Trump? Vladimir Putin. It is generally assumed that while Trump is able to pay his legal fees through his super PAC, and they're not even sure that's legal, it is generally assumed he is not allowed to dip into the super PAC to pay the E. Jean Carroll judgment or the $500 million judgment in the New York civil fraud trial. Alina Habba, who famously said it's more important to be pretty than it is smart, his attorney, Alina Habba, late last month told an appellate judge it would be, quote, impossible for Donald Trump to come up with $500 million in 30 days or ever. Impossible. She said all he can muster maybe is $100 million. The appellate judge said, that's interesting. I need $500 million in March. I think it's due like in a week or two. And if Donald Trump doesn't come up with $500 million, or if he doesn't post bond, New York State Attorney General Letitia James, who brought the civil fraud trial, has gone on record repeatedly that she is more than happy to start seizing Trump's properties and selling them off one by one to pay the $500 million fine. Has to go into an escrow account this month. How does he come up with that $500 million? This is why I'm happy that it's going slowly. So we get to peel this back. You don't want this to all happen at once. I know we're all frustrated about the court's ruling. Was it Monday where they said he gets to stay on the ballot in Colorado? The court was never going to rule against Trump on that one. I know we're frustrated, but there's a lot happening. It's death by 1,000 cuts to the Trump organization. Enjoy it. Again, the Supreme Court cannot save Donald Trump when it comes to the civil fraud trial or the E. Jean Carroll trial. He either has to post bond or $91 million for E. Jean Carroll and $500 million for Letitia James in the civil fraud trial. So he needs $600 million in the next, I would say the next week, certainly before April. And if he posts bond, that $600 million quickly becomes $700 million, 800, maybe a billion. Maybe a billion. It's going to be expensive for him to find a lender. The Economist reports that the Supreme Court is trying to help Donald Trump. They scheduled oral arguments. I didn't know this. They scheduled oral arguments on Donald Trump's immunity appeal. They scheduled at the latest date possible. As you know, the Supreme Court's term ends in June, and that's when they hand down a majority of their opinions. Their last oral arguments, I didn't know this, are at the end of April, and that gives them about 6 weeks to make the bulk of their decisions. And they scheduled the immunity hearings on the last day that they possibly could. They took the 14th Amendment challenge immediately and ruled in favor of Trump immediately. But the issue of presidential immunity, where Trump has absolutely no standing, they should have never taken this case. They should have just let the lower circuit court ruling stand. That has been delayed as late as possible. The hearings on immunity, a ruling that most decidedly will be against Trump, are at the end of April, the last day possible to hear the oral arguments. So we know whose side this court is on. It is generally agreed that they will rule against Trump on presidential immunity. But by delaying their ruling, they are buying Trump enough time so there probably won't be a conviction before the November elections in those two federal trials. There are two federal trials, the Espionage Act violations down in Miami and the election interference trial in Washington, D.C. That's what the presidential immunity ruling is about. But as I've said earlier, and it's important to remember this, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's criminal trial goes ahead this month. It is not a federal trial, so it is not subject to the issue of presidential immunity. And next week, we should expect a ruling from the judge in the Fulton County, Georgia, RICO trial on whether District Attorney Fani Willis must step down because of her romance with the lead prosecutor in the case. Donald Trump is expected to have the Republican nomination cinched either by March 12th or March 19th. The party meets in Houston today, where his takeover is expected to be consummated by his daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, becoming the Republican Party's new chair. The takeover is expected to be complete by the end of the weekend. It will be Donald Trump's Republican Party. Trump, his daughter-in-law, as well as Trump's top campaign advisors, all promise that no donations to the RNC will ever be used to pay his legal fees. Sure. The problem Trump is facing is because of him, the RNC is broke. Everything this man touches, everything, the RNC is broke. The Republican National Committee is broke, and so are the state Republican parties, especially in very important swing states like Michigan, Georgia, and Arizona. Those are three states which Hillary lost and Joe Biden won. The big donors are shying away, including Elon Musk. Musk met with Trump and at least pretended like he won't be giving him any money. The big donors are shying away because they know what their money would be spent on, and it's not going to be spent on winning in November. It's going to be spent on Trump. Biden and the Democrats right now have way more money heading into the general election, and it's going to stay that way. In fact, there's going to be a yawning chasm between what Biden has to spend and what Trump and the Republicans have to spend. And whether it's fair or not, these elections are won by who spends the most money. One of the reasons the Republican National Committee is broke is because of legal fees. But not Trump's, not completely Trump's. Michigan and Georgia are broke because the state parties are paying legal fees racked up in the prosecution of the phony elector scheme. It was all Republican operatives who participated in the phony electors scheme, and the Republican Party is paying their legal fees. And now Arizona, Republican Party in Arizona, is facing the heat as the state attorney general issued subpoenas this week and has begun calling before a grand jury Republicans who participated in Arizona's phony elector scheme. Lawyers are expensive, and thanks to Donald Trump isn't the only Republican who needs them. The big quit. How are we doing on time? The big quit. Nikki Haley, Mitch McConnell, and Kirsten Sinema have all announced they're quitting. First up, Nikki Haley. There is nothing noble about this woman. She dropped out. Nothing noble about Nikki Haley. The bar has been set incredibly low here in America when someone assumes hero status for merely stating the obvious, that Donald Trump is unhinged. That's heroic because she called Donald Trump unhinged. All Nikki Haley tried to accomplish was further, by running, all she tried to do was further Donald Trump's anti-union corporatist agenda with a little more finesse and a less ham-fisted tone. Nikki Haley is less scary than Trump, and in many ways that makes her scarier. This is a woman who kicked off her campaign by inviting Pastor John Hagee to deliver the invocation. Hagee famously blamed Hurricane Katrina on gay people and called the Holocaust a blessing because it created Israel. After he spoke, Haley thanked him and said she wants to be just like Pastor Hagee when she grows up. Nikki Haley ran as a proud union buster who couldn't even bring herself to say the Civil War was about ending slavery. She promised to pardon Donald Trump, and despite being a woman, said she agreed with the Alabama Supreme Court's decision giving personhood to the unborn. Nikki Haley is a hustler. That being said, she helped expose Trump's weaknesses when it comes to character and integrity. Not that she has any. Politics is not just policy. It's also about morality and character, something both Haley and Trump lack. But Haley did succeed in shining a light on just how bereft of human decency Donald Trump is. She shone the light for Republicans to see. It came way too late in her campaign. In fact, hours before she dropped out, Haley finally found her voice and called Trump unhinged. But when Trump is defeated, she will have played a part. She can be blamed for Trump's defeat in November. What has become apparent, and I talked about this in December, I said, is he running as an incumbent? I wasn't sure. What has become apparent now is that Donald Trump is running as an incumbent. Back in December, I said, we're going to find out. It's been more than 100 years since a former president ran again after being out of office. I believe the last time was Teddy Roosevelt in 1912. And I don't think he ran as a Republican. I think he ran, wasn't the Bull Moose Party? He was a third party candidate. So Trump's campaign, uncharted territory in the modern age. And I have said since the beginning of the year, we are about to find out whether Trump is running as an incumbent. Does the Republican Party see him as an incumbent? Do the voters see him as an incumbent who's running for reelection And now they most certainly do. There's no denying that he has been running as a perceived incumbent since day one. It's his party. It always was his party. Since 2016, he owns the infrastructure. We now know that's for certain. And if he is, in fact, the incumbent, and he is, then Nikki Haley did to Trump what Ronald Reagan did to Gerald Ford in 1976 and Ted Kennedy did to Jimmy Carter in 1980. In 76, Reagan was a primary challenger to Gerald Ford, and Ted Kennedy in 1980 was a primary challenger to Jimmy Carter. They were two primary challengers that softened up two incumbents who then went on to lose in November. Now, the difference between Ted Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and Nikki Haley is the weakest. She did in terms of getting votes and winning primaries, she performed the worst of the three. Reagan and Kennedy scored major victories. Haley did not, which furthers the argument that Trump is running as a rock-solid incumbent who is running for reelection, as if the 4-year interim never happened. And for that reason, we now have to measure him against Biden, who is also running as an incumbent, to measure their performances. And when it's incumbent on incumbent, Biden is outperforming Trump. Biden, yes, is being challenged on policy, Gaza, but not his character. Biden did strongly in Michigan and Minnesota, but uncommitted there came in a strong second. It was a protest vote, a wake-up call, reminding Biden that his unwavering support of Israel at the expense of more than 30,000 Palestinians in Gaza, mostly women and children, is unacceptable to a large swath of Democratic voters. But unlike Trump, nobody is questioning Biden's decency, just the indecency of his foreign policy. And he is responding to this challenge on his policy. He has responded during a State of the Union. Biden announced our military will establish a makeshift port along Gaza to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian aid. And he's calling for an immediate ceasefire. Nobody is saying, like they are with Trump, that Biden is unfit for office. Nearly all of Donald Trump's former cabinet members have refused to endorse him. Many say they're either voting for Biden or staying home on Election Day. Yes, a majority of Democrats believe Biden's creaky, and they wish someone younger were at the helm. But maybe not so much after last night's stellar State of the Union address. Biden is winning these primaries by huge margins, much larger than Trump is winning his primaries. Trump lost Vermont. He lost Washington, D.C. to Haley. Nikki Haley on Super Tuesday won hundreds of thousands of votes and revealed how weak Trump is with college-educated Republican voters, especially those living in urban and suburban areas. Haley only won 24 counties on Tuesday. But what those counties all have in common, according to Politico, is nearly 40% of the voters there had a college education. Trump cannot win with the educated. And a new Emerson poll out this morning shows that a majority of Republicans who voted for Nikki Haley on Super Tuesday plan on voting for Joe Biden in November. This is a big poll. Now, they say don't pay attention to polls. Well, A new Emerson poll shows that a majority of Republicans who voted for Nikki Haley on Super Tuesday say they plan on voting for Joe Biden in November. Not only that, the Emerson poll shows Biden and Trump in a dead heat now. And what's it going to look like after last night's State of the Union? Haley, so far, has refused to endorse Donald Trump. And that prompted criticism from Ron DeSantis, who said she's going back on her word. DeSantis said, "We all signed the Republican pledge to endorse whoever wins the nomination." He's right. All the candidates signed a pledge to endorse whoever gets the nomination. Every candidate signed that pledge except one, Donald Trump. He refused to sign the pledge. In fact, he refused to promise not to run as a third-party candidate if he failed to secure the Republican nomination. Let's return to Kirsten Sinema, the one-term senator from Arizona, who announced this week she will not be seeking re-election. Good riddance. And this, by not seeking re-election, allows her to keep her war chest, which I think is north of $10 million. She, like McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy got to keep his $20 million war chest. Kirsten Sinema gets to keep her war chest. And that means, with her dropping out, the race for Senate in Arizona comes down to Ruben Gallego, a Democratic congressman, and I believe it was Iraq. I think he's an Iraqi war veteran, maybe Afghanistan, but he is a veteran. He'll be running against Carrie Lake, a former newscaster turned election denier who lost her bid for governor in 2022 and is all in on Donald Trump. Gallego is a terrific candidate and will make an even greater senator from Arizona. And if you're an American citizen, you might want to consider donating to him. Sinema was elected as a Democrat and then last year became an independent, but she still caucuses with the Democrats. She fancies herself a moderate, but all that really means is, just like Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who also isn't running for re-election, all it means is she's a money-grubbing tool of the corporatist wing of the Democratic Party. As Axios pointed out, back in 2022, Sinema blocked eliminating the filibuster when it comes to passing civil rights legislation. She helped kill significant portions of Build Back Better, like raising the minimum wage. She was proudly against raising the minimum wage. At the same time, she helped preserve hedge fund managers and private equity's carried interest tax loophole that saves them billions a year in taxes. She will not be missed. Apparently, the people of Arizona concur. I've talked about the polls. In a three-way matchup, she was coming in third, followed by Lake, who comes in second, and then Ruben Gallego. She was also lagging in fundraising during the last two quarters. And late last night, Sinema ruled out the possibility of running for president on a third-party ticket. People keep asking her and Joe Manchin to run as third-party candidates. Like anybody would vote for these. And then there's Mitch McConnell, who announced last week he will not return to the Republican leadership position after November. The question remained, would he endorse Donald Trump? Donald Trump, who not only attacks McConnell, but also McConnell's wife. Well, the same way Trump attacked Ted Cruz and Ted Cruz's wife, McConnell endorsed Trump this week. Ted Cruz was humiliated by Trump in 2016, but he endorsed Trump, and McConnell was humiliated by Donald Trump. Nevertheless, he made it official this week he supports Donald Trump because in the end, for McConnell and the Republican Party, it's about lowering taxes for billionaires and controlling the courts. And in the end, McConnell was able to forgive January 6, Trump's fascistic ambitions, all forgivable so long as it means the rich get richer and the courts get filled with anti-democratic corporatists who want to preserve the ruling class's power. Speaking of Ted Cruz, Congressman Colin Allred emerged on Super Tuesday as the Democratic nominee down in Texas to challenge Cruz. Ted Cruz, who is running for reelection. Allred is probably going to be a much more difficult opponent for Cruz than Beto O'Rourke turned out to be back in, was it 2018? Beto, there was just he was inauthentic. Allred, I wanted him to win, but he was inauthentic. Allred is a former professional football player, turned civil rights attorney, turned progressive congressman, and this is a race we'll be paying attention to. We can pick up a seat in Texas, perhaps. Cruz may be vulnerable. As I've been repeating, the electoral map is frozen. You have to win the Electoral College. You got to get to 270. And this is a frozen map. All Biden needs to do is win Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. If he loses Wisconsin, he just needs to win either Georgia or Arizona again. Remember, he won Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona. Those are the 5 states Hillary didn't win in 2016. Now, the electoral map favors Biden. He didn't win North Carolina in 2020, and neither did Hillary in 2016. But there's now reason to believe North Carolina is in play. North Carolina was a battleground state back in 2008 when Obama won it. But it's been reliably red ever since, although it does have a Democratic governor. In fact, since 1992, Democrats have controlled the governor's office every election cycle except one, which is why Democrats are holding out hope that Joe Biden can win in North Carolina. Politico has some very interesting Super Tuesday exit polling. This is amazing. 2/3 of Nikki Haley voters in North Carolina on Tuesday said they have no plans to vote for Trump come November. And half of her voters in North Carolina said they approved of the job Joe Biden was doing. I just want to repeat that. These are exit polls from Super Tuesday. 2/3 of Haley voters in North Carolina on Tuesday said they have no plans to vote for Trump come November. Half of her voters in North Carolina said they approved of the job Joe Biden was doing. Now, Obama won North Carolina in 2008. Who was his vice president? Joe Biden. And they came close in 2012. And Biden in North Carolina may benefit from an updraft of votes in North Carolina as Democrats and independents turn out to vote against this guy, the Republican nominee as of Tuesday for governor of North Carolina, the loathsome Mark Robinson, the state Republican lieutenant governor, who is running against the state attorney general, Democrat Josh Stein. A new video of Robinson surfaced this week, where Robinson said, this was in 2020, quote, "I absolutely want to go back to the America where women couldn't vote," unquote. And that's just the tip of the ice turd. Abortion is going to be on the ballot in North Carolina. Also, Robinson is a Holocaust denier, a real honest to good Holocaust denier who wants to outlaw abortion entirely. He calls the LGBTQ community filth, and he compares gay people to maggots. He says COVID was invented by the globalists to destroy Donald Trump. Robinson is black, which is why when Donald Trump endorsed Robinson, he called him Martin Luther King on steroids, which is probably true. I think Robinson sounds like Martin Luther King on steroids. Well, more like Martin Luther King on steroids, meth, and angel dust. This is an election. This North Carolina gubernatorial election will be getting a lot of national attention. Robinson would become the first black governor of North Carolina. Stein would become the first Jewish governor of North Carolina. This is great news for Joe Biden, because a lot of Democrats who are lukewarm on Joe Biden will be voting anyway, because they know exactly how they feel about this guy Robinson. So it looks like North Carolina could be in play. Hey, we had a good week. Joe Biden nailed the State of the Union last night. Americans are just starting to pay attention. Make sure you're registered to vote and spend 1 hour a week, working locally for the Democratic Party. 1 hour a week. That's all it takes. And I have an assignment for you, because the news has been dispiriting, and I have a lot of listeners overseas, and they're frustrated because they love America and they can't stand to see what we're becoming. And there's nothing they can do. They can't donate to our candidates. They can't, well, unless they're Russian and they give to the NRA, but that's for the Republicans. But you cannot donate to our candidates if you live overseas, and you can't vote, and you feel powerless. I'm going to give everybody an assignment. Here is President Joe Biden's address. Send a postcard, not a letter. And you know why. Letters, you see what's going on. Letters are dangerous. Just send a postcard to Joe Biden and thank him for your own mental health. I always ask you to donate to candidates. I always ask you, call Joe Biden, tell him what's happening in Gaza is unacceptable. Call this senator. And, I always tell you to attack our leaders. Well, this morning I'm asking you to send a postcard to Joe Biden. I thought his State of the Union was stellar. We have a poll, by the way, I forgot to mention, in the chat room. So while I'm talking, if you're watching live right now on YouTube and you're in the chat room, please answer the poll. The question is, how do you think Joe Biden's State of the Union went? And the three choices are meh, fantastic. The third choice is, I think he just got himself reelected, which I think, personally, I think he got himself reelected last night. His address is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C., zip code 20500. When our leaders do something good, when our politicians do something good, they deserve a pat on the back. I was deeply moved by Joe Biden's speech, and I noticed on C-SPAN he was the last one to leave the room. He stayed till everybody walked out. He was in his element, politicking, shaking hands. He left no doubt that there's fire in his belly. I believe, he is, as they say, as Winston Churchill said, the crown always finds the right head. I don't believe that. I don't believe the right ass always sits in the Oval Office. But I think we've gotten lucky with Joe Biden. I think he's a gift. And everybody should, for your own well-being, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C., 20500. Send him a postcard and thank him for a great job. All he gets is complaints and headaches. Don't send him money. Just flood the White House with postcards. And this is a great way for my overseas listeners to express gratitude to Joe Biden. Until I started doing this podcast, I didn't realize how people overseas worry about this country. I think it might have something to do with the 50,000 nuclear warheads. I think that might be one of the reasons they're rooting for us. Anyway, thank you we had a good week. This was a good week. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Oh, let me go to the poll. We have a poll. I almost forgot. I don't know if Bob is here. We started late this morning. Let me see. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. This country. I think it might have some. Okay. We have 1,343 votes. The question is, how did Biden do last night? And the choices are meh, fantastic, he just got himself reelected. We have a tie. 6% said meh, 47% said fantastic, and 47% said he just got himself reelected. So that's 1,365 votes. No, it's not changing. Okay. Thank you all. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. I will try to do a show Saturday night. Thank you.